Julie Zicka. Next will be James Hanna.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I wanted to start this morning by telling you all thank you very much, Chairman and committee members, for giving me the opportunity to come today and tell you a little bit about my son, Ryan Joel Zika. Here really mainly speaking on his behalf, as he is unable to do it here today himself. My son Ryan passed away in 2011 at the age of 19 in Pocatello, Idaho. He was gay, and he was a wonderful kid. He was very civically minded. He wanted more than anything to find a way as a young man growing up to give back to his community and his country. He spent 9 years in the Boy Scouts of America and really bought into what they teach young scouts, as far as being engaged in your community and country and giving back. Ryan was a live scout when he left the organization. As a young gay man, he had reached a point in time where he was quietly presented with the opportunity to either continue with the Scouts to get his eagle, or to, and in doing so, hiding who he was, or he could be true to himself and not hide who he was and leave, which was really what he ended up doing. Ryan was somewhat unstereotypical young gay man in what a lot of people believe gay young men to be. He, outside of the Scouts, he also hiked, he hunted, he backpacked, he fished. He was a precision rifle shooter. When he was 14 years old, my husband and I let him take a 30-day backpacking trip with family friends to hike in the Sisters Mountains in Oregon, and he actually was able to get to the top of the mountain range. And we never once, my husband and I never once considered worrying about him, because he was such a confident, capable, self-reliant young man at that time in his life. Excuse me. At age 15, though, my husband and I and my son moved from Spokane, Washington, where he'd spent his whole life, to Pocatello for my husband's work. And within days of starting school in Pocatello, the harassment started for Ryan. First it was things like name calling, and then it got progressively worse. There were pushing and shovings in the hallways, and one night he went to a party with some friends, and as a 15-year-old, well, probably 16 by then, young man, and he was literally dragged out of the party by a group of some of the more popular kids who had a problem with the fact that Ryan was openly gay, and they drug him out into the snow and beat him up so badly, punched him in the stomach so hard that he was vomiting, and then left him there. There is a lot of that kind of thing, especially in schools, and you hear about it a lot right now as far as bullying goes. But the thing that was really interesting was that as my son, he barely made it through the 10th grade that year. My straight A student, who I brought to Pocatello, the capable, confident, straight A young student, almost failed the rest of the 10th grade because it was so awful for him there. And we, as a family, made a decision to send him back home to Spokane to live with his grandparents because of his treatment at his high school in Pokey. At age 18, though, Ryan started to have some health issues, and we brought him back to Pocatello and told him that he could come to stay with us for a little while he got back on his feet. And we kind of thought, he's an adult now, so that type of treatment, that ends in high school, right? And I'll be dealing with the community there as an adult, and I won't have to deal with these things. But what we found, though, was that the treatment really wasn't very much different as a young adult for him. The bullying that he faced in the community, though, was just a little more silent than what he faced in high school. He would be, he'd go to try to get an apartment and have the landlord show up and realize that my son was gay with his partner there. And all of a sudden that apartment was rented. And or he had a job that he ended up losing after many, many issues with his employers there, because he lost because he was gay. Really long story short, that young man that I took to Pocatello that was so strong and confident and capable, within 4 years time was systematically torn apart, shredded little bits by bits. He lost all of that. He lost his confidence. He began to fight depression. January 14th in 2011, I was here in Boise with my husband on a business trip. And we got a text message one night leaving a fly fishing expo where we were working. At the same time, our phones both went off. And we received a message from my son that said, please forgive me. Please remember always that this is not your fault. That I love you, and that I've always loved you, and that I'm up at Pebble Creek. And there was no doubt about it. We both knew right away that this was a goodbye message. I tried as best that we could to spring into action. I was calling my son on one phone, and my husband was calling the deputies there in Bannock County, trying to get a welfare check, at Pebble Creek Ski Resort, where he had Ryan had taken a firearm from our home and drove from our place up in Pocatello to the ski resort. It was dark, knee-deep snow, literally. He climbed the side of this mountain as far as he could go, as high as he could go, with almost no winter protection, just in a little pair of boots and a hoodie. And when he got to the end of the trail and there was no further trail to go, he sat down and he sent us a note, and then he took his life. He had to have been so determined that day to even get there, is what just amazes me, that somebody had been pushed that far. I didn't even know how he got his truck up the hill. It was 7 miles straight up in a two-wheel vehicle. He just had to have been so determined to get there, to get away from it all. Because of my son, I founded a nonprofit organization, and I work with a lot of other at-risk gay kids. And I hear a lot from them that one of the reasons that they reach that point in time is that they feel no hope. They see no hope of a brighter future for themselves, that they will be not considered a second-class citizen, that they will be able to do all of the things that we are able to do, you and I, our civil rights that we probably take for granted every single day. These kids are really smart. They're really plugged into the environment around them, and they look around them and they see that, that the things that are affected, that there isn't going to be a change. And I guess I just wanted to let you know that I'm here today in support of House Bill 2. I think it's really important. It's a very important first step for these kids to give them some hope of a brighter tomorrow, that they'll have the opportunity to work, to find a home, to love a partner, to raise a family, or whatever it is that they want to do, but to contribute to Idaho, to to their community in the same way that everybody else has or is allowed to. But thank you today for your time.
Are there questions? Representative Jordan.
Mr. Chairman, more of a comment. I would like to
We'll take
thank,
questions now. There'll be time for debate later, Representative.
okay, I just have a comment.
Best that if you have a question for that person that's testifying, that we hear that now. You'll have time for comments later.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? Hearing none, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative McCrosty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Zicka, first of all, I want to thank you for sharing your story with us and the story of your son. It is certainly, to say the least, heartbreaking, and my condolences for your loss. I'd like to ask you, if Ryan were here today, do you believe that he would be a civic-minded, tax-paying citizen in our state?
Absolutely. Yep, he was incredibly civically minded his whole life. I mean, as a very young child, he used to be very engaged in the world around him, and sometimes even the world farther than that, paying attention to things in countries, halfway around the world. So yes, I believe he would very much so be a civically minded young man working and contributing to the state of Idaho.
Thank you.
Further questions? Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.
Next is James Hanna, to be followed by Peter Sprigg. After that, we'll have Sylvia Cheriton. That'll do for there. One word of caution here: if you're having a hard time hearing in the overflow rooms, we will be cycling back through these names. We want to make sure that everyone has a chance to testify that is signed up to do so. Go ahead, sir. Please state your name and who you represent.
My name's James Hanna. I represent myself. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, where to begin? I currently live in Pocatello, was raised in Blackfoot, Idaho, a third-generation Idahoan, and I support the passing of HB 2. Ryan was a really good friend of mine, so there's that adds to a lot of this. I never expected discrimination to happen based on my sexual orientation. I was working at Harbor Freight Tools in Pocatello in 2009 to 2010. I had a coworker that was sexually harassing me and telling me things that nobody should ever have to hear. I happened to be sick one day and brought a big bottle of orange juice and asked people, "I'm sick, please don't drink from it." And he blatantly looked at me straight to my face and said, "I would never drink from something that you have touched because I do not want AIDS." The man, because of me being sick with chronic migraines, thought that I was HIV positive, was telling coworkers and the general public in Pocatello that I was HIV positive. When I finally turned him into the company, they came in, investigated it, slapped him on the wrist, and let it be. I felt that there's sexual harassment that was not taken care of, and I called the Idaho Human Rights Commission and asked them to file a report, and was told that they would not file a report because I was openly gay. They would not prosecute sexual harassment. That ended up forcing me to leave my state and go somewhere else for employment that I felt safer in. I shouldn't, as somebody that was raised here, I should not be forced to leave because I was threatened and felt unsafe to be here. This is one of the many reasons that I ask that the words sexual orientation and gender identity need and should be added to the Idaho Human Rights Act. Not supporting this is not the Idaho way. Idaho is about respect and dignity of everybody here, and not doing that is showing that you don't care about all Idahoans. Thank you.
Other questions? Hearing none, thank you, sir. Peter Sprigg. followed by Sylvia Cheriton. To be followed by Carmen Stanger. State
Good
your
morning,
name for
Mr.
the record,
Chairman,
please.
members of the committee. My name is Peter Sprigg. I'm a senior fellow for policy studies at the Family Research Council in Washington, D.C. Thank you for the privilege of speaking to you today. I urge you to oppose House Bill number 2. When it comes to the operation of private businesses and private organizations, our default position should be to support freedom, not to increase the regulatory burdens imposed by government. We should have faith that the people who know best how to run a business are the people who own and operate it, not lawyers, government bureaucrats, or even legislators. And we should have respect for the freedom of businesses, schools, and nonprofit organizations to hold to their own deeply held beliefs and to act on such beliefs. Yet this bill would substitute the judgment of government officials for that of private businesses and organizations regarding what qualities or characteristics are most relevant to a particular job and regarding how to operate their business. Ironically, communities in Idaho that have adopted similar laws at the local level have reported almost no complaints. Many businesses, as you heard earlier, have already adopted such policies as an internal business decision. These facts undermine any suggestion that discrimination of the type targeted here is endemic or that government action is required to arrest the problem. A business that places unfounded prejudice ahead of legitimate qualifications will be punished by the forces of the free market itself. There is no need to bring the heavy hand of government down upon it. However, where such laws exist, they can result in costly lawsuits and crippling fines, putting some small enterprises out of business altogether. Such laws invite disgruntled employees to sue for discrimination over a characteristic, in the case of sexual orientation, which is not even visible and of which the employer may have been unaware. In the case of public employers, such laws at the local and state level have led to large settlements being paid at taxpayers' expense. Disgruntled customers have sued businesses in the wedding industry under the public accommodation provision of such laws for declining to participate in same-sex weddings, even when the business made clear that they would gladly serve individual homosexual customers in other ways that would not involve celebration of their homosexual partnership. Now, this is not to say that there is never any place for non-discrimination laws at all. Sexual orientation and gender identity, however, are unlike most other characteristics protected in civil rights laws. The Federal Civil Rights Act of 1964, for example, bars discrimination based on race, color, national origin, sex, and religion. The first four of these, race, color, national origin, and sex, are included largely because they are inborn, involuntary, and immutable. Religion, while voluntary, is explicitly protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Yet none of these traditional categories of protection involves as large an element of chosen behavior as sexual orientation or gender identity, where the issue is not who someone is, as with race and sex, or what they believe, as with religion, but is primarily about what they do: engage in sexual relations with someone of the same sex, in the case of sexual orientation, or present oneself as the opposite of one's biological sex, in the case of gender identity. Finally, laws like House Bill number 2 may do little to prevent unjust or irrational discrimination, but at the same time may prepare the way for reverse discrimination. The more open homosexuals and transgendered people become, the more people who hold traditional values will be forced to conceal their sincerely held personal beliefs or face punishment from the government for expressing them. This has happened even when an employee's views are expressed outside of work and even when no explicit reference is made to sexual orientation or gender identity. Efforts to add sexual orientation and gender identity as protected categories under civil rights laws should be opposed by anyone who believes in freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of belief, a free market economy, and limited government. Thank you.
Are there questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next up will be Sylvia Cheriton, followed by Carmen Stanger. And then we will have Arvel Bahima, I think, is the next one after that.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Sylvia Cheriton. I represent the American Association of University Women. The American Association of University Women of Idaho fully support HB 2, add the words legislation. Discrimination against our LGBT family, friends, neighbors, and coworkers in housing, employment, and safety is morally and ethically wrong. Finally, after 9 years, we have a chance to bridge the ethical and legal protection gap which has evaded these bona fide citizens. Despite any past personal misgivings one may have had regarding this group, it's important not to let any past erroneous biases perpetuate into the current public policy arena. All people, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity, need to be treated equally. American leaders in the past have been called upon to bridge other large ethical and legal protection gaps on things that now are taken for granted. If no one ever challenged the status quo, there would be no abolition of slavery, women's suffrage, child labor laws, or other gender protections such as Title IX. Idaho school children are taught that all people are created equal and that everyone is equal under the law. Currently, these facts are just not true in our state. They will not be until sexual orientation and gender identity are added to an amended section of Idaho Code 187301. The American Association of University Women is comprised of 165,000 members nationwide, educated women and men who support Add the Words. Statewide, we represent 244 Idaho citizens who support this long overdue change to the Human Rights Act. Please stand in your truth on this issue, approve this legislation, and do what is right and just for these people. Thank you.
Are there questions? Thank you, ma'am. Carmen Stanger?
Ms. Stanger cannot speak now. She'll be.
Okay. Let's see, who did I announce next? Arvel Bahima, followed by Julie Staley. Let me get somebody else up here.
My name is Arvel Bahima, and I'm representing, I hope, most of the citizens in the state of Idaho. Mr. Chairman, committee members, I want to address the claim by many LGBTs that they were born with their sexual orientation or gender identity. This is to justify their demand for protection from discrimination. We know that environmental factors influence our self-identity. But the reality is that all of us are designed by God to be heterosexual. Except for rare congenital defects, all men produce sperm that have purpose only in union with women. And all women produce ovum that have purpose only in union with men. LGBT behaviors are perversions of our innate design. Granting special protection based on behavior will result in the violation of the beliefs, rights, and sensitivities of our citizens. Like in the state of California, where in their schools, boys who identify themselves as girls can enter girls' bathrooms, dressing rooms, shower rooms. Now, would you want your daughters to be subjected to that? And there's a woman in Richland, Washington, a florist, who would not sell flowers to a gay couple for their wedding based on her religious convictions, and she's being sued. Now, I hope this doesn't happen in Idaho, and we can prevent it by not going along with this bill. And I would suggest also that you look at these other states that have put those names on their lists for protecting their rights, okay? Like in California, Oregon, and Washington, and other states in the country. Look what's happening with all the controversies that are coming out of this. We don't want this in Idaho. Please, don't let it happen. Thank you.
Are there questions? Thank you, sir. Julie Staley, followed by Nick Dumas, followed by May Rude, I think it is. Welcome to State Affairs. Please state your name.
My name is Julie Staley, and I represent myself. I'm a private citizen from Idaho Falls. And I want to thank all of you for hearing us and for representing us. What you have to decide today is a tough decision that will allow all people the same rights. In Idaho Falls, in September of 2013, our city councilman had proposed a non-discrimination ordinance. And it was brought to our attention. It was in the newspapers. The newspaper definitely had a view. They were for this ordinance. And because my husband and I value everyone's rights, we wanted to know why the need. Was there discrimination going on in our city? We read, we studied, we discussed. I looked up a lot of stuff. And what I came up with is I was disappointed with the neighboring states who had passed ordinances that have allowed what I call reverse discrimination was going on. Particularly, I took note of a photographer that was charged a $7,000 fine because she would not take pictures for a wedding. My husband has a dental business in Idaho Falls, and I considered, would such an ordinance affect his business? I wasn't very concerned about it affecting his business, but I was concerned about my friends that had floral businesses and that sort of thing. So I wrote a letter to the editor, and I voiced my concern that this could possibly affect people like that. On the morning that my letter was published, my husband's office was called within 10 minutes of opening with an irate woman who not only called my husband a bigot, it was written by me, remember, but she threatened to hurt his business by telling everyone she knew, by publishing anti-bigotry stuff about him, and by telling all of her neighbors and her friends never to visit my husband's office again. Of course, my husband's partners were very disappointed. It was going to affect them as well. So I thought, wow, this city ordinance is going to affect my husband's business just because I had an opinion. I didn't say anything rude or offensive. My husband treats everyone in his office fairly, and he's aware of the negative impact that these people have had. He's very sympathetic to those that have felt suicidal things. He loves everyone. This really hurt his feelings. That he was worried that he might be like the photographer and not be allowed to live his religion and have a business. And that's what happened to the photographer. She couldn't choose both. We felt that passing the ordinances would have invited this kind of behavior. Please understand that I have felt the sting of discrimination myself. My choice of response was nothing like this woman's. I simply chose to take my business elsewhere. I didn't make any threats, I didn't call anybody names, and I didn't file a lawsuit. What I fear passing a non-discrimination order in Idaho will do is incite mistreatment from the group who feels they have been offended. And I agree, they have been offended. Yet there are other ways to create awareness, to make people aware of the feelings that are hurt. But what about the feelings of the Kleins from Gresham, Oregon, who have a bakery that they closed because of such mistreatment, being called names, having boycotts towards their business? What ordinance protects them? On the other hand, this ordinance hurts them by giving that gay couple the desire to file a lawsuit. My question is, why didn't they just go elsewhere? Why is it so important to target small business? It never crossed my mind to sue the doctor who offended me in an act of discrimination. I simply went to another doctor. Why would we want to fill our courts with such cases? Who's going to protect the small businessman who does understand, who openly welcomes these people and does want them to feel welcomed and solicited in their business, but stand a risk against those that may feel that discrimination has happened to them and choose to use that as a tool? So my vote, or my plea to you, is that you vote against this bill the way it is written for the purpose of defending people like that. Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Julie. Next is Nick Dumas, then followed by May Rude, to be followed by Robert Spiel.